This is a brief history of the Anabaptist Schrag family and their sojourn in Switzerland and Germany. This is a narrated widescreen slideshow, and it is formatted for those that might be visually or hearing impaired. Note that I am a descendant of those Schrags that moved to Dallas, Oregon in the 1880s, so I apologize if at times my pronunciation of a Schrag reverts back to my Schrag rhyming with rag. Recently, extensive Y-DNA studies have been done on our Schrag family DNA by FTDNA's Schrag surname and J2PF5197 projects, of which I am an administrator. What we have learned is considerable, and for more detail on what and how we have learned this, I will refer you to an upcoming article, Schrag Genealogy, in light of an analysis of Y-DNA studies done by the Schrag Y-DNA Research Group by me. This will be in the January 2024 issue of the Mennonite Family History magazine. With the coming 500th anniversary of the formation of the Anabaptist sect, we want to learn just a bit more of how we fit in. This presentation will concern itself only with those Schrag lines which followed the Anabaptist path. By the early 1700s, the Anabaptist Schrags had fled Switzerland, and any Schrags left in Switzerland after this time had likely reverted back to the Reformed faith or were never Anabaptists in the first place. The few facts we do know about these early Schrag Anabaptists are pieces of a larger puzzle we hope to construct. So how far back in time shall we go? As a result of research done recently by the Schrag Surname Project, we have learned that we belong to Y-DNA haplogroup J2A. And from the J2A PF5197 project, we have learned that this particular subgroup originated about 14,000 years ago in the area around Mount Judy, shown in the map below. Mount Judy is located in the Zagros Mountains between Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. Below is a photo of Mount Judy taken in Turkey. Syria is behind Mount Judy at the right, and Iraq located behind at the left. According to very early Christian and Islamic tradition, Mount Judy is Noah's place of descent, or the location where the ark came to rest after the Great Flood. Current tradition has the ark landing on Mount Ararat, some 200 miles to the south. I am Swiss Valhenian on my father's side and a descendant of Joseph, the fourth son of Johannes and Elizabeth Albrecht Schrag. Joseph was the only son that married outside of the Galician community, Mary and Freeney Gering, daughter of Moses Gering, of the Amish Montbeliard group. My father's mother was also a Gering. Since I have a lot of Gering DNA, I had the Y-DNA of the Gering family tested. The result, the Gering Y-DNA test found that the Swiss Gering family belongs to Y-DNA haplogroup J2B. So they are distant relatives of our Schrag J2A group. And 14,000 years ago, the Gerings may also have resided in the area around Mount Judy. But our paths diverged long ago. Both ended up in Switzerland, albeit by totally different routes. DNA studies tell us that our ancestors likely arrived in Switzerland about 2,000 years ago as part of an effort by Rome to populate the area with citizens of the Roman Empire. In our case, coming from the Near East, perhaps Syria, We would become, in effect, early Roman settlers, whereas our distant cousins, the Hungarians, were perhaps part of the Germanic or Alemannic tribes that took over after the demise of the Roman Empire. Presently, we know of three distinct families that descended from these early Schrag ancestors about 1600 years ago. Our Y-DNA designation at that time was J2A Y20308. The Schrag surname likely arose in the 1300s, and the name is associated with the term hillside dweller. The first written reference in Switzerland to the name Schrag is the Schrag vineyard, which was located south of Zurich, probably on a hillside. The surname Schrag developed independently about the same time in Germany and probably refers to someone who made cross-legged tables. DNA research indicates that they are not genetically related to our Schrags of Nuremberg, Switzerland. As mentioned earlier, at least three different clans have now formed from our early Swiss ancestors. These three are the Schrag, Sternemann, and von Dijk families. Earlier research found that there were Schrags in three Swiss locations: Winningen, Feuerthalen, and Edesville. After over 1,000 years, these three distantly related clans were still clustered in the area between the cities of Bern, Lucerne, Zurich, and the Rhine River. An interesting side note is that the Sternemann surname is thought to have been derived about the same time as Schrag and refers to dwellers living near the eyebrow of a hill, or similar to the Schrag hillside dweller. Until recently, most of what we knew about the Schrags of Switzerland is from research done by the Schrag historian and genealogist, the late Peter Schrag of Switzerland. Through DNA tests, we know our Anabaptist Schrags are from the community of Winningen, and more specifically, the hamlet of Nuremberg. It is interesting that both the Sternemann and Schrag families lived at Edesville. The Schrag family just prior to the Reformation, the Sternemann family just after. The Edesville Schrag was having problems with the church. Now, Swiss towns with the names ending in "will" were established during Roman times. Both families have a history of living in villages ending with "ville," meaning villa, and appear to have been members of the ruling class. This supports our thinking that we are early Roman settlers. Edesville belongs to the Catholic canton of Lucerne, whereas Winningen is in the Protestant canton of Bern. The two towns are about 15 miles apart. A Winningen income directory for 1262 does not include any Schrag hamlets, which indicates that they arrived after that. So it is very possible that the Schrags migrated to Winningen from the Edesville area, perhaps to escape the church. The first written record of our family is for Hans, who was born in 1547 at Misselberg. For those interested in DNA, the Y-DNA designation for those early Schrags is JY20319. A photo of Misselberg is shown below. A coat of arms. The Winningen Schrags did have a family crest, with Misselberg likely the Winningen Heimat. The symbolism behind the design is as follows. The term Schragen denoted a piece of land bordered by a fence made up of latticework. The stag's antlers represent the whole animal and symbolize the tree of light. More specifically, it is symbolic of heaven, light, growth, purity, and regeneration. He is a messenger of the gods and possesses knowledge of healing plants. Hans married and had 10 children, the first of which is Hans II, born in 1573 in the hamlet of Breitenegg. He would be our 9 times great-grandfather. As an adult, Hans II moved back to Misselberg, and any children born were all baptized into the Reformed Church in Winningen upon birth. While at Misselberg, Hans II married, and soon after moved to the hamlet of Limburg. This became our Swiss home for about 100 years, and by that time the hamlet had grown to encompass 7 families. Hans II had a son, Nicholas, who was born in 1623, and our Y DNA underwent another mutation with or soon after his birth, and our Y DNA designation is now JY125345. This is important as it enables us to genetically distinguish ourselves from his older brother's family. The Reformed Church in Wittigen was rebuilt in the 16th century, and it is here that our Schrag ancestors were baptized at birth. The first of the tower bells in the bell tower was crafted by a bellmaker in Bern in 1619. This speck bell was used to remind field workers when it was lunchtime, and could probably be heard at Misselberg and Limburg. This church is where all the Schrag birth, death, and marriage records were kept. The Wittigen Church website has this photo of the old baptismal font, which was saved, during the major restoration in 1671. Most Schrag newborns were baptized here. The font remains today. Many of the Schrag men were chorister's or church morals court judges. Very few became Anabaptists. The Wittigen Cemetery, well, there is none, but there are walls around the church, and some of these have been memorialized. Perhaps there are some Schrags being memorialized on the wall. There are large cemeteries at nearby Bergdorf and Alfoturm, but I have not seen any record of Schrag burials at either place. The Anabaptist Schrags. It probably all started in 1634 when a Bible was given to a Nicholas Schrag by Hans II. Nicholas reportedly gave it to his son Ulrich, but there is no son Ulrich. So Nicholas, born 1623, was probably the first Anabaptist Schrag, and Hans II could be considered to be the father of the Schrag Anabaptists. And Nicholas, a first-generation Anabaptist. He would have been 11 years old, so it could have been a baptism present. This Bible now resides in the Lancaster Mennonite Historical Society Library. It is actually quite exciting to have an heirloom from that era. Nicholas's sons, Nicholas born in 1660 and Benedict born in 1667, were then second-generation Anabaptists. They were likely not Amish. The Bible made its way to America around 1769 with Ulrich Schrag, who was born in 1740, husband of Anna Christner, when he migrated to America. The only problem is he was not a descendant of this Nicholas. Now, Schrag, a variation of the Schrag ceremony, arose in the United States in the 1700s when custom agents wrongly spelled Schrag with an O and a K. The Schrag name should not be confused with the German surname Schrag. To understand how the Bible may have gotten to Ulrich's hand, we need to study a bit of Schrag genealogy. Now, Hans II married in 1600 and had a son, Uli, in 1602. After his wife died, Uli married Margaret Hildbrunner in 1612. It is recorded that Uli and Margaret had 3 more sons, Jost, Hans, and Nicholas. But a question arose after a descendant of Hans tested negative for Schrag DNA. Now, we do know that Margaret had a Jost and a Hans by a previous marriage, so it is possible they were stepsons of Uli's. But there is little doubt about the DNA of Uli. There is no record of Uli being an Anabaptist. And in fact, Hans, born in 1619, is known not to be one. Uli goes on to marry and has several sons, one whose name is Ulrich, born in 1641, and it turns out that the son of this Ulrich, Hans, died in Felsenbrunnerhof, Germany, which strongly implies he's an Anabaptist, which in turn suggests that Ulrich, born in 1641, is an Anabaptist. Three other facts support this. First, there is no civil record of Hans being baptized at birth, which a good Anabaptist might want to avoid. Second, Hans moved around a lot so that each child was born in a different hamlet, perhaps to avoid detection by authorities. And lastly, just before the death of Ulrich's father, Uli, Ulrich and his brother Hans, who was a querctor, sold the farm as if they were trying to avoid confiscation of the land as it was passed down. Now, if Nicholas was a devout Anabaptist, he would have tried to bring some converts into the fold. When Nicholas was about 30 years old, he was still single and likely somewhat lonely, and probably chummed around with his 12-year-old nephew, and upon his conversion could have given him his Bible and called him his son in the faith, just as Timothy was to the Apostle Paul. I know there is a bit of speculation here, but it does explain why the Bible was not passed down from father to son. Also of interest to us is that Nicholas managed to keep his son Nicholas's birth a secret, as there is no civil record of it. Now, back to our Anabaptist family. Nicholas was undoubtedly an Anabaptist, as were his sons Nicholas, Benedict, and their children. Things were getting tough for Anabaptists. It was mentioned earlier how the land of Ulrich, born in 1641, was sold, perhaps to avoid confiscation. This happened again at the time of the death of Benedict in 1694, when Hans, the querctor, was again involved in selling land, possibly Benedict's, to avoid confiscation by authorities. As Limburg was only about 4 miles from the present Troxelwold, the family was certainly familiar with it, as they were of the 1702 Amish drives in the Emmental Valley, where the Amish hunters were paid to catch Anabaptists. Then more recently, in 1709, a new drive was ordered, offering something like $30 for each Anabaptist man, $15 for each woman. And then in 1711, the authorities made a major push to exile all Anabaptists from Switzerland. It was time to leave. The non-Anabaptist Schrags had undoubtedly done what they could to not draw attention to their Anabaptist brothers. The question arises, what was the cost to them? Well, likely it cost them ownership of the hamlet of Limburg and their positions in the ruling class. As mentioned, Benedict passed in 1694 when his son was 7 years old. So likely Nicholas took over the responsibility of raising him. Now, being a close-knit family, it stands to reason that the third generation of Anabaptists would have left as a unit, 2 couples with a child, a couple, and a single man. By looking at the dates of marriage and childbirth, this probably happened around 1711. By this time, almost the entire second generation would have passed. Only Nicholas, who was born in 1641, remained, and at age 70, and had passed within a year. So around 1711, we can construct a snapshot of what the Anabaptist Schrag family of Switzerland looked like. This is the Schrag family, Anabaptist Schrag family of Limburg in Switzerland. In the following slides, the names of these 9 exiles will be underlined and in bold. Their son's name will be in bold only. Well, where to go? Well, probably to the mountains in the Jura area. See the photo I left of the red border there between Switzerland and the Jura area. Here rules were less strictly enforced. Now, first to the exiles, Ulrich born in 1687 and a wife Margaret. We know that Ulrich stayed in the Jura area and raised his family there. He managed to retain Winningen as his Heimat, and years later some of his descendants actually returned there. A grandson, Benedict, who was born in 1767, and some of his children migrated to Ohio in 1817. Another grandson, Johannes, born in 1812, migrated there in the 1850s. Now, Hans, born in 1668, and his family. A distinguishing fact of this branch is that DNA-wise, they are SNP 125345 negative, whereas all of the rest of the Lüneburg Anabaptist Schrags are Y125345 positive. We know very little of them, except that Hans died in Felsenbrunnerhof in the Plotnet. His descendant, Ulrich Schrag, born in 1740, and his wife, Anna Christner, and perhaps two small children, arrived in America on the ship Nancy and Suki on September 1st, 1769, probably from Winstein, Alsace, France. He would most likely be a grandson of Hans. There seems to be a generation missing here, and we have no idea whether they live in Germany or France. Perhaps Ulrich's father was this mysterious Nicholas who was born in 1708. Next to Caspar, who was born in 1685, and his wife Elizabeth and son Caspar. We know more about Caspar and Elizabeth than the others. They are next found in Gemsheim, France. The photo at right is of the mill there that he reportedly worked in as a transient laborer for a year or two. Caspar was known to be an Anabaptist when he married Elizabeth Leyenberger in a Catholic ceremony in Gemsheim, France on August 9, 1711. The marriage is interesting in that they were likely married in Switzerland before by an Anabaptist preacher, but such marriages were not recognized or legal. Also, Elizabeth was either very pregnant when they left Switzerland or their son Caspar had already been born, necessitating the need for a quick marriage, which would likely not have happened in the plot. A daughter, Ada, was also born here in 1712. Caspar and his family traveled north to the Plotnet soon after their daughter was born. They reportedly lived at Ingweilerhof near Zweibrücken for the next 50 years or so. They are now Amish. Ingweilerhof at that time was reportedly a large two-story rectangular building. There was also a mill there for weaving. The structure still exists. Their son, Caspar, who was born in 1711, also lived in the area, as did his own sons, Caspar, who was born in 1744, and Nicholas in 1750. Caspar, who was born in 1744, lived in the area until after his first two sons were born and then moved to France around 1770. Some of his descendants' surnames changed to Grach or Gerard. A fair amount is known about their time there, but we will not dwell on it. There are still descendants there. Caspar, who was born in 1744's grandsons, Johannes and family migrated to Illinois in 1831. The wife of Nicholas, who was born in 1750, died before having children, and he remained in Germany and where his line dies out. At Ingweilerhof, three sons were born to Caspar: Ulrich in 1714, John in 1715, Nicholas in 1717. In 1722, a daughter, Elizabeth, was born. Now, what made news back then hasn't changed, for as a youth she was sentenced to spend 1 month laboring in the castle gardens for the crime of fornicating with a temporary laborer. Next to Nicholas, born in 1717. We know almost nothing about him, except that in 1753 he was the first of the Schrag Anabaptist men to migrate to America. He arrived with a son, 8-year-old Caspar Schrag, born in 1745, along with two other youth who were assumed to be Caspar's brothers: Ulrich Schrag, born in 1740, and John Schrag, born in 1730. Now, Ulrich Schrag, born in 1740, was introduced earlier with the Bible. Now, Caspar could have arrived with two brothers, but they were not. Ulrich, born in 1740, and John, born in 1730. Next to John, born in 1715. We know very little of John. He reportedly lived in Hornbach in 1767. He is thought to have traveled to America in 1785 with his son John, who was born in 1745, and his wife Barbara Esch, and three of their small children. Now, John, who was born in 1715, and Nicholas, who was born in 1717, on our DNA share STR mutations on the STRs DYF 401.2 and DYS 711, which pretty much ensures that they are close brothers. Ehrlich, born in 1714. Ehrlich was reportedly leaseholder at Ernstweilerhof, where on June 6, 1735, by magistrate's order, he married Elizabeth Meyer, a maid from Switzerland, on her being with child. They had twin girls, Anna and Magdalena. He married Anna Meyer in 1736 after Elizabeth's death. Then Ehrlich and Anna had a son, Ehrlich, in 1737 at Ernstweilerhof. This Ehrlich had two sons at Gersbergerhof, John and Jacob. His family spent time in Varia. Most of Jacob's line moved to Canada in 1812, and Jacob's grandson, Christian Schrag, born in 1826, his family moved to Tazewell County, Illinois in 1846. Ulrich and Anna had a son, Johannes, in 1740 at Falkenstein. This Johannes married Elizabeth Albrecht at Albschein on der Ice in 1764. They had 8 children there before moving to Falkenstein, Galicia in 1784. John was one of the last Schrags to leave Germany. The family joined the Hutterite colony at Wyszanka briefly before moving to Volhynia. And in 1874, about 125 of their descendants bearing the surname Schrag migrated to America. Ehrlich and Anna had a third son, Andreas, back in Ernstweilerhof in 1742. Andreas married Suzanne Bachmann, and they had a son in 1779 before moving to France. Andreas died in Vacaville in 1809. And it appears Andreas had 3 wives, and the dates of his marriages are very confusing. For the most part, Andreas' children made France their home, and their surname changed from Gerard, Schrag, Gerard, Schrock, Schrack, Gerach, Gerach, or even Sarach. However, a few descendants did find their way to America in the mid-1800s, where they became known as Schrag. Recent autosomal DNA research and family records strongly suggest that our Ulrich, born in 1714, had a 4th son, Henry, born in 1755 by a woman named Catherine. Their family records show Henry's father as Ulrich, and that he had a brother, Johannes, who had a son, Jacob, and that Ulrich died in 1761. This all suggests that the Johannes named was our Johannes, born in 1740, husband of Elizabeth, and that Ulrich lived near Johannes at Albschein. So Johannes likely raised Henry after his father died, until Henry decided to go to America, perhaps as a young stowaway. We do know that once in America, Henry Schrag was no longer an Anabaptist, and that he served in the Revolutionary War. And after the war, his family moved south, where a grandson, Minter, who served with the Confederate Army, was a slave owner and had children by the slave woman, Melinda Kane. An Amish songbook, the Ausbund, perhaps given Ehrlich as a wedding present, showed up in America. It is not clear just which of his children or grandchildren might have brought it. An inscription in the book reads, "Dear book, What I want to tell you, if someone comes and wants to carry you away, let me lie in good rest. I belong to Schrag, 1736. Many of the songs in the Osmond were written in the dungeon at the castle of Passau between 1535 and 1540 by some of the 53 Anabaptist prisoners there, many of whom were executed. Peter, born in 1693. We know very little about this last of our 9 Schrag Swiss Anabaptist diaspora. We only know that when examining our Y-DNA results, he rises to the top as the best candidate as a father of John Schrag, who was born in 1730, that arrived on the ship Polly on October 18, 1766. He is thought to have spent time in the Netherlands before traveling to America. John had a son, John, born in 1754 by an unnamed wife, who probably accompanied him. These Strasburger ship lifts also show a Johann Heinrich Schrag arriving on October 13, 1766 on the ship Betsy. Now one can easily guess that Peter had been close to his nephew Ulrich, who had been born in 1714, and lived near Opsheim. Perhaps this Johann Heinrich is the Henry Schrag previously mentioned. And it is possible that John, who had a son about Henry's age, offered to take young Henry with him to America, and that they traveled together, only to get separated before departure. John would have taken the river route from Opsheim to Rotterdam, shown on the following map of the Holy Roman Empire of 1789. Notice the number of sovereign states that they would have to traverse. This is the route John Schrag, born in 1730, would have taken to the sea. The Rhine River there, circled in red. Falsgrafenstein Castle in the middle of the river was one of about 25 custom houses they passed. There was a chain which stretched from castle to shore, which could be raised, stopping the ships to extract the toll, which could be considerable. So in summary, it might seem that some of what has just been presented is borderline historical fiction. But then much of what we thought we knew before was pure fiction. It is possible that there were other Schrag Anabaptists in Switzerland, but if there were, they never made the news. And since this is a surname study, we have not followed the lives of any Schrag daughters. The total number of Swiss Schrags in Germany was never very large, probably not exceeding 45 or so. And by about 1785, they were all gone. Now, although few of us still consider ourselves to be Anabaptists, the hope is we have a better understanding of that period in our history. The End, by Tim Schrag, me, November 1st, 2023.